Hi guys, Jeremy here from Precision Sales. I've just been asked to do a quick design session on sliders and mast attachments, how your mainsail is going to attach to it, does it affect us in design, and what are the options available for you. So I figured that we'd start with talking about the most common ways that people are attaching their mainsails, what are the common slider types, bolt rope, etc., and are some better than others. We'd then go on to the third-party systems that you have available to you. There's tons of different systems available, ball bearings, limousine cars, tide marine track, all that stuff with half a dozen different companies all selling you different options, and which one you may want for your boat. And finally, we'll talk about how it affects us in design. Does it affect the design of the sail itself? As well as how many sliders are you going to put on your sail, or are we going to put on your sail, and how is that going to affect handling the sail or making adjustments. So the most common sliders that are available are round, flat, semicircular, or half round, and external. Flat and round sliders are by far the most common. They come in nylon and metal, and honestly there's a huge wide variety of them available. If you don't have a slider that's the exact same size as what is on our measurement form, fill in what your sliders are, and we'll be able to place ones that either we'll find exactly what sliders you have, or we can place a slider on that's going to fit in your mast just fine. We do have a selection of several dozen different sizes and different companies that make plastic and metal sliders. We just don't add them all onto the measurement form because it would be a whole page that's not necessary and just maybe a little overwhelming. As far as the half round, they're great sliders. They only come in plastic, and they do claim that they slide better than the traditional round sliders. Well, I don't have any personal experience with these actually functioning that much better. I will caution you to be careful about changing from one style to another. If you had a round slider that worked just fine on your previous sail, then I just caution moving over without taking very close measurements of your mast gate and the mast track itself. And I'd even suggest finding one half round slider or whatever that you're going to change it to, and try running it up the mast. Just see if it's going to function better before you get a brand new sail with a bunch of sliders that are going to fight against the grooves that you have inside your mast track. The last one, as I mentioned, is the external sliders, and this is a much more traditional style of luff attachment. It was very common in the 70s and early 80s, and the issue that we have commonly run into with external sliders is that they used to make the tracks in different sizes than the sliders that are now available. So it's become fairly common for our clients to then get a tide marine track or a Harken track or a third-party track to run over top of it that will function better. The external sliders are more prone to jam. They kind of twist sideways, and this is usually when a track doesn't match exactly with the sliders that are available. The external sliders available come in 15 mil, 22 mil, and 25 mil. If you do find that the sliders that you get in your new sail are just that little bit too big, it's very possible that going to the next size down is just going to be too small and not be able to squeeze on. You're better to give them a little squeeze with a pair of pliers, try to just bring them in a little bit and see if it'll function better. Very often the external sliders get put on a little plastic clip. That way you can just switch them out. Also, the little grooves on them seem to wear through webbing quicker than any other type of slider, and the plastic clip is able to withstand that. So both longevity and prudence in order to make sure that the slider can be switched out if need be. So the last thing that I wanted to quickly talk about before we move on to the third-party systems is bolt rope. Should you be attaching bolt rope? Why do people still use bolt rope? We have sliders. Is there any advantage to it? If you are using your boat for performance use, then yes, getting bolt rope can provide a bit of an edge. Even for club racers, it's probably not necessary. is really negligible, but you are eliminating the little space between the sail and the mast, which means as you're pointing and the wind is going across your sail, doesn't have anything to dip into. And what we're really trying to do is just increase our laminar flow, make sure that it's very streamlined, make sure it's really smooth, and having that gap in there just provides one more place for the wind to kind of dip in. So for performance sails, yes, having bolt rope will provide you with that little extra edge on the sail. That being said, they do have some fairly major disadvantages. The first one, which they both kind of run into each other, but the first is just that the bolt rope is way harder to hoist. If you've ever had trouble hoisting your sail on sliders, this is 1,000 times more friction inside that groove. You're going to hoist it up. It's going to rub on along the entire mast track, and if you are on a big boat with a 40-foot luff or something, it's going to be a pain in order to get the sail all the way to the top. Once it is all the way to the top, you're then going to have a pain trying to apply more halyard tension to increase your luff tension, and kind of stretch that out as the whole sail is having to kind of stretch then the entire length of that mast groove. The second disadvantage of having bolt rope is that we need to make sure that we leave a little bit of room, a couple millimeters on the inside, to ensure that there's enough room on the inside of the mast or the mast groove, that it's going to be allowed to grow. Luff tape has a nylon core. Nylon swells over time, and that means that if it does start to grow and starts to rub on the inside as well as along that slot, you can get more friction, which is going to make it even harder for you to pull it up. Also, the unevenness of the bolt rope means it's going to start catching on anything that's on the inside. Any dents or divots or anything that isn't perfect on the inside of that mast groove is going to catch on anything that is slightly swollen or imperfect, any imperfections along the bolt rope itself. So with bolt rope, you are going to gain a little bit of performance, allowing easier laminar flow over top of your sail, reducing or eliminating that gap between the sliders and the mast. But on the flip side, you lose a lot of the comfort and ease in being able to hoist your sail quickly and stably. So as you can see, I've just put a couple pictures of some very common third-party systems. The ones that I have down there is the Roszmann limousine style, the Harken ball bearing, as well as the Tides Marine or Strong Track stainless steel systems. Each one has its own benefits as well as some disadvantages, and so we'll just quickly run through them. The first one is the Roszmann system. This is a limousine style, and there are other companies, I believe that Schaefer makes some, that have these wheels on them that kind of bounce in and out. They run really well. They don't need their own track to run up. You can use them in an existing mast groove, and they come in a dozen or two different sizes and styles in order to accommodate whatever your dimensions are for the mast groove. So number one advantage, no external track that you have to put onto it yourself. They run much smoother, the wheels spin really well, and they do shift and allow for any sort of divots or imperfections in the mast groove. So they will probably run a little bit better, and as well as the wheels are allow for a bit more of a frictionless slide as opposed to the plastic or the metal round or flat sliders that are obviously going to grind up and down. And the wheels do spin, and they have a little bit of a layer on there in order to allow it for a bit more of a frictionless, smoother run. The ball bearing style made by Harken, and again there are other systems. I believe Facnor makes one. Another great system. The Harken ball bearing system is a great system. It does have its own track, which increases the price a little bit, but it runs really smooth. The ball bearings rotate and are a great solution as far as the needing a track system. I do find that generally in mechanical systems, the more moving parts you have, the more issues you can run into, and you may need to change a slider out from time to time. With that being said, they're really got a high working load. It is an awesome system. I'd say the biggest disadvantage is the required Harkin headboard that they have with the headboard slide system. There are ways of getting around it, and to Harkin's credit, they even provide the dimensions required in their manuals if you're not going to use it, a simpler headboard system. Most people, though, when they have a Harkin headboard system, they want the Harkin headboard. Again, there's a little bit more of a cost to it. There's several different options we can do. We have all of the specifications required in order to use a different headboard to the headboard, as well as or a ring with a pin, all that kind of stuff. There's different ways of getting around it. Finally, with the Ties Marine system, Ties Marine system I think is just an excellent system. It was a great innovation by a company that instead of continuing to complicate the problem, they kind of went back to the drawing board and they re-simplified. And so you do have to get a Ties Marine track. It's very simple in order to order it, and you can just ask us here to get you it. But it comes in a little, they'll send you a little plastic disc. It's got little edges on it, then you figure out which one fits inside of your mast groove. They will then send you a track to feed up your mast groove, so you have a second track that sits outside. And then on top of that, you'll then have the Ties Marine sliders that are machined within a millimeter, and they slide like butter. It really is an awesome system. The Ties Marine sliders are very easy to take on and off your sail. It's literally just a pin with a little loop that you can pull them out and put them onto a new sail, so they can be transferred from sail to sail. You may have noticed that on the Reckerson low pitcher down there and the Harkin system, they do have threaded pins, and I believe this is common for all Harkin systems as well, and just about any third-party system you're going to get. These are for your full battens. And the full batten receptacles, if you have one of these systems, just be aware that your receptacles are going to have to take a threaded pin. Common Bainbridge A303 or A300 batten receptacles, they aren't going to be able to take those sliders. It's a fairly simple upgrade into a slightly heavier duty batten receptacle that takes the threaded pin. If you are reusing a luff card system, your sailmaker is going to need to know what the size of that threaded pin is, because almost universally at this point, companies are going with 10 mil threaded pins. But unfortunately, when we're reusing systems, they did used to, and many still do have options for 12 mil threaded pins. This is generally for heavier duty boats and bigger boats, but I have seen them being reused on boats as small as 30 feet. So just for simplicity's sake, take your pair of calipers and run it over top of the threaded pins. Always go lengthways. And make sure that it is actually 10 mil, so that when you get your receptacles, you know that you're going to be able to thread it in. 2 millimeters doesn't seem like that big until you're trying to put a 2 mil thread into a receptacle. It's just not going to work. So you can see there they've got the thread pins. Those would be for full battens. All the other sliders, as far as head sliders and reef sliders and intermediate sliders, they're going to be webbed on. And the most common way of doing this is that we will attach webbing loops at each position that will accommodate for that particular slider. For example, the webbing put on for the headboard slider is larger than the webbing used for the intermediate slider for Ties Marine. Okay, so the last section that we talked about is how is it going to affect the design of your sail? Is there a difference between having one of the standard flat sliders and having a Ties Marine track put onto your sail? Yes, it will in fairly minor terms, but it does affect the sail in a number of ways. The most important thing that we need to take into consideration is the fact that the sail is going to get pushed back. So depending on the type of sliders you have, whether it's a system that has a tides track or a Harkin track that's going to push it back a little more, that luff of the sail is going to be is going to be moved. The luff of the sail is going to get moved back, and in so doing, it's also going to move the leech back further, which can risk the leech of the sail coming into contact with your backstay if the backstay and the leech of the sail are already fairly close. So this is a design that isn't quite done yet. We're still in the midst of doing it, so the outline hasn't been really tailored. I did want to use this as an example just so that you can see exactly what happens before we get into design with the head of the sail. Because as far as the leech hitting the backstay, it's not that big of a deal. Generally, your leech won't be behind the backstay, flat against it, and as you're tacking, it's going to curl underneath, and you're going to be able to pass fair enough. As well as, the leech is going to be able to curl in behind, cross underneath. But what you have at the head of your sail, generally speaking, is a head plate. And that head plate is a flat piece of metal. And if that gets pushed back behind the backstay, then you're going to have to either slightly drop your sail every time you want to tack, or it's just going to sit up there and bang away on it, and it's not going to be able to get through. So the reason I chose this particular design that we're working on at the moment is because it has a fairly small crane. And if we are to adjust for a slider, a tides marine track, and we take it to the P measurement of 12.3, we can see that this headboard clearly is going to be crossing past this backstay. So because of his tides marine track, essentially we need to drop the luff a little bit more, and that's a significant change in your sail design. One of the main components of the sail design is how long is it going to be? Well, if you have a tides marine track and you have a fairly small crane, there's a good chance we're going to have to drop it down by a few inches to make sure that that headboard is not going to hit that backstay. And not only that, we need to make sure that we're leaving enough room that as the sail stretches over time and grows a little bit in length, as it tends to do, or if you're inducing extra sail shape and stretching it in order to run higher winds, or run upwind, then you're going to start to find that you're running into issues because those tides marine tracks or Harkin track is just pushing it that little bit too far back. The other thing that I want to touch base on as far as the design is where each slider goes. So if you have just a standard sliders, which will work fine, where do we put the plastic sliders? Where do we put the metal sliders, and why? Essentially, plastic sliders will slide better. They get worn in by the grooves. They're light, and they are still quite strong. Well, it's not rare, but it's also not very common that sliders start snapping off unless they're really being put through the gears. So having plastic nylon sliders at your intermediate points, rather here and here and here, is just fine. And in fact, it's not going to grind up along the inside of the mast nearly as much as metal sliders. So metal sliders on the other side will start to grind inside, and if you have the entire line of luff sliders, first of all, they're going to bang around and be a whole cymbal band inside your mast. But the other half of it is just going to every time that goes up, you're going to have 15 sliders grinding away on the inside of the mast. So they're going to cause more friction, and they aren't going to slide as better. On the plus side, they are stronger. So areas of high load, your reefs, your full battens, your head, those should all have metal sliders. These are the highest load areas along the luff, and making sure that they're protected well enough, or that they're strong enough rather, that they're going to be able to hold on is very key. So plastic sliders at your intermediates and stronger metal sliders at your high load areas is the most common practice. Hi guys, thanks for watching. I hope this has been really informative and is going to help you find out what system you want to have your mainsail running on along the luff. If you have any comments or questions, again, please don't hesitate to reach out, and we're more than happy to work with you. Other than that, safe sailing, and We'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.